Welcome to my channel. World Scene News. Subscribe to my channel for news updates all around the world. The United Nations Security Council chamber was tense, the air thick with anticipation and anxiety. Every seat was filled, and the eyes of the world seemed to peer in through the marble walls. The sense of urgency was unmistakable. This was not just another day at the UN. The world's most powerful diplomats gathered for an emergency session, summoned within hours of the shocking events in Doha. Some arrived in haste, their faces drawn and grave, clutching last-minute briefings. Others exchanged hurried whispers, aware that every word spoken today could echo far beyond these walls. The crisis at hand, an Israeli airstrike in Doha, Qatar, intended to target a Hamas compound, but instead resulting in the death of a Qatari security officer. The attack had sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles, raising fears of a wider regional escalation and putting Qatar, a key mediator, directly in the crossfire. Israeli Ambassador Danny Danon sat ready to defend his nation's actions, his expression steely and composed. He shuffled his notes, preparing to justify the strike as a necessary act of self-defense, even as the room bristled with skepticism. Meanwhile, Pakistan's ambassador Asim Iftikhar Ahmad was visibly furious, his anger barely contained. He conferred with aides, his voice low but intense, determined to hold Israel accountable and demand a strong international response. The Qatari Prime Minister's rare presence underscored the gravity of the violation. It was a clear signal. Qatar would not let this attack go unanswered, and the world needed to recognize the seriousness of the breach. Israel's usual allies, the US, UK, and France, were uneasy, their unity shaken. They exchanged worried glances, aware that their support for Israel was now under intense scrutiny, and that any misstep could have lasting diplomatic consequences. This was no routine debate. It was a direct confrontation over a military action that had shocked the international community. The stakes were higher than ever, with the potential to redefine alliances and set new precedents for international conduct. The attack was seen as an assault on diplomacy itself, threatening Qatar's role as a mediator in the Gaza conflict. If Qatar's neutrality could be violated, what did that mean for the fragile peace process and for the safety of diplomats everywhere? The chamber buzzed with the knowledge that today's words could reshape alliances and deepen divides. Every delegate weighed their statements carefully, knowing that the world was watching, and that history might judge them for what they said or failed to say today. The world watched, anxious, as the Security Council faced a question bigger than one airstrike. Do the rules of sovereignty and international law still matter? In capitals from Washington to Beijing, millions followed the proceedings, aware that the outcome could alter the course of global diplomacy. The meeting began, the air charged with the sense that history was about to be made. As the gavel struck, the world held its breath, waiting to see if the Security Council could rise to the challenge, or if the rules that have governed nations for decades were about to be rewritten. Israeli Ambassador Danon wasted no time justifying the strike, framing it as a necessary act of self-defense against a global terror threat. He argued that Hamas leaders should find no safe haven, anywhere. Then, he drew a provocative parallel. There should be no immunity for Hamas, just as there was none for Osama bin Laden. Danon referenced the US raid in Abbottabad, challenging the world to apply the same standards to Israel. He accused the West of double standards, praising the US for violating Pakistani sovereignty, but condemning Israel for a similar act. Why is Israel condemned for defending itself against terrorists? He demanded, eyes fixed on the US delegation. His argument was bold, reframing the debate as one about global hypocrisy on terrorism. The chamber bristled, the comparison igniting immediate controversy. Pakistan's ambassador Ahmad rose, his anger barely contained. The tension in the chamber was palpable as he prepared to respond to what he saw as a grave misrepresentation. He called Danon's comparison unacceptable and ludicrous, dismissing it as a deliberate distraction from Israel's own violations of international law. Ahmad's voice was unwavering as he challenged the narrative being pushed by the Israeli delegation. Ahmad reminded the Council of Pakistan's immense sacrifices in the war on terror, highlighting the thousands of lives lost and the relentless efforts made to combat extremism. He firmly rejected any analogy to bin Laden, calling it a baseless and offensive comparison that ignored Pakistan's commitment to global security. He emphasized that Pakistan had stood shoulder to shoulder with the international community, often at great personal and national cost, and would not allow its sacrifices to be diminished by false equivalencies. Turning to Israel, Ahmad called it an occupier, responsible for tens of thousands of Palestinian deaths over decades of conflict. He accused Israel of using the rhetoric of terrorism as a smokescreen to justify its aggression and ongoing occupation. To compare a strike on a terrorist leader with a brazen attack on a mediator's capital is a grotesque distortion, he declared, his words echoing through the chamber. Such comparisons, he argued, only serve to muddy the waters and distract from the real issues at hand. Ahmad insisted the real issue was Israel's blatant violation of Qatar's sovereignty and the deliberate undermining of ongoing peace efforts in the region. He warned that such actions set a dangerous precedent for international relations. He reframed the debate, making it clear that Israel was not a victim in this scenario, but a rogue state acting above the law and disregarding the norms of the international community. The chamber listened intently as Ahmad demanded accountability for the attack on Qatar, urging the council not to lose sight of the fundamental principles at stake. The focus shifted back to the core issue: the sanctity of international borders and the urgent need to protect the peace process from further erosion. Ahmad's words left a lasting impression, reminding all present of the stakes involved. The real shock came when Israel's closest allies spoke. For decades, the United States, the United Kingdom, and France have stood by Israel, often shielding it from international criticism. But this time, the tone was different, measured, grave, and unmistakably critical. U.S. Ambassador Dorothy Shea delivered a rare rebuke. This operation was counterproductive. It undermines security and diplomacy. Her words, delivered with a somber expression, marked a dramatic departure from the usual unwavering support. The U.S., long seen as Israel's staunchest defender, was now voicing public disapproval in front of the world. The UK's ambassador condemned the strike as a violation of international law, warning it threatened regional stability. The British delegate's statement was clear: actions have consequences, even for allies. The UK too was drawing a line, emphasizing the importance of upholding international norms. France echoed the condemnation, calling the attack a breach of the UN Charter and a blow to peace. The French representative's words underscored a growing consensus among Western powers that certain actions could not be ignored, no matter who committed them. For the first time, the US, UK, and France stood united against Israel, not with it. Their joint statements sent a powerful message. The rules of the international order apply to everyone, even to friends and partners. Their message: even allies have limits, and international law must be respected. The alliance, once thought unbreakable, was now being tested in the open, under the scrutiny of the global community. The chamber felt the weight of a diplomatic earthquake. Israel's traditional shield was gone. The atmosphere was tense, as delegates realized the significance of this unprecedented moment. The coordinated criticism signaled a turning point, leaving Israel isolated. Other nations, emboldened by the West's stance, joined in the condemnation, further deepening Israel's diplomatic isolation. The world saw that even the strongest alliances could fracture over principle. Headlines around the globe reflected the shock and gravity of the moment, as old certainties gave way to new realities. The Security Council for once spoke with a single censure-filled voice. The message was clear: no nation, no matter how powerful or well-connected, is above the law. Qatar's prime minister took the floor, his presence a symbol of outrage. Our sovereignty was violated, our efforts for peace were attacked, he stated, voice cold with anger. He described the strike's impact: a civilian area bombed, a Qatari officer killed, and trust shattered. Qatar, he argued, had worked tirelessly as a mediator, only to be repaid with violence. This is an attack on diplomacy itself, he declared, rejecting the idea that hosting Hamas equaled supporting terrorism. He insisted that dialogue requires engagement with all sides, not just friends. Israel's actions, he said, endangered global security by silencing negotiation. He demanded a full condemnation and accountability from the Security Council. The message was clear. This was a breach that could not be quietly forgiven. Qatar's demand for justice would echo long after the session ended. As speeches ended, a rare consensus formed. All 15 Security Council members, including the US, UK, France, Russia, and China, agreed to a joint statement. The statement condemned Israel's airstrike, affirmed Qatar's sovereignty, and called the attack a violation of international law. No American veto. This was historic. The Council drew a red line. Military strikes on mediators would not be tolerated. Israel's attempt to reframe the debate had backfired, uniting the Council against it. The world signaled that even legitimate security concerns could not justify trampling sovereignty. The implications were profound. Israel faced unprecedented isolation and pressure. The diplomatic shockwaves were only beginning. The UN drama quickly spilled onto Pakistan's streets. Outraged by Israel's comparison to the bin Laden raid, the hardline TLP party called for mass protests. Thousands marched from Lahore to Islamabad, anger boiling over. Clashes erupted near Meridka, stones, petrol bombs, tear gas, and chaos. Vehicles burned, and by day's end, 5 people were dead, including protesters, a police officer, and a bystander. The violence exposed the volatile mix of religious fervor and anti-Western anger. The government struggled to restore order amid diplomatic fallout. The protests showed how words at the UN could ignite real-world crises. The anger reflected deep frustration with perceived global injustice. The UN showdown revived old wounds and exposed new dangers. Israel's bin Laden analogy tapped into the war on terror narrative, but the world had changed. For Pakistan, it was a painful reminder of past humiliation and sacrifice. The strike on Qatar, a mediator, threatened the very foundation of diplomacy. The Security Council's unified condemnation was a desperate defense of neutral ground. Without trusted intermediaries, peace becomes impossible and war perpetual. The crisis revealed the fragility of the international order and the dangers of eroding diplomatic norms. The fear, if sovereignty and diplomacy collapse, only violence remains. The Security Council clash was about more than one airstrike. It was a fight over the rules that keep the world in balance. Israel argued for the right to strike terrorists anywhere. Pakistan called it a violation of sovereignty and law. The West's condemnation signaled that even allies have red lines. The attack on Qatar, a peacemaker, was seen as an attack on the hope for peace itself. The crisis strained alliances, sparked violence, and put the future of diplomacy at risk. The world now faces a test. Will international law hold, or will power decide? The outcome will shape global trust and the rules of engagement for years to come. As the world waits, the hope is for de-escalation. But the risk of chaos looms.